Nazim Sadykhov vs Nikolas Motta is the UFC fight of the year so far. An exciting old-school toe-to-toe slugfest that boasted some of the best close-quarters striking you'll see. The fight was so good that even the loser got a performance bonus, which very rarely happens in MMA. This is the definition of a banger. UFC made their debut in Azerbaijan with this July 21st, 2025 Fight Night on ABC 8 card, aka UFC Baku. While the main event was once again dull, featuring an incredibly tentative, washed-up Jamal Hill, who was fighting not to get KO'd rather than like he has any aspirations of regaining his UFC light heavyweight championship, this back-and-forth war between Sadykhov and Motta more than made up for it. Sadykhov was born in Moscow to Azerbaijani parents and grew up in New York, but the fans supported his heritage in a big way, and he rewarded them by fighting a more exciting and action-oriented fight than he had to, given he was the far superior technical fighter, with both more weapons on his feet and a much stronger ground game. The fighters really fed off the crowd for once, one of the aspects so sorely lacking since the UFC still insists on having most of their shows take place in the kiddie cage before 100 silent VIPs. Sadykhov is a legit prospect with only one win by decision, who hasn't lost since his first fight and was a minus 470 favorite. He certainly gave the standout performance, but Motta didn't get the memo to lay down for the local favorite. Motta was mostly punching, but he is very powerful, mixing tough body shots with series of heavy hooks. He hurt Nazim early and just kept pouring it on. It looked like this was going to be over around the 2.5 minute mark, just from pure unanswered power punches, but Sadykhov was actually defending pretty well, all things considered. Nazim's block was in place, and he was still rolling with the punches and bobbing and weaving. There just wasn't really a good opening for him to either escape or fire back, because Motta was doing everything he could to overwhelm Nazim with a rapid-fire barrage of power punches to force the stoppage. Motta's determination with his high volume and big power would have been enough to make a lesser fighter give up, or a lesser referee than Lucasz Bosacki stopped the fight before it came to that. But one of his liabilities is his targets are pretty similar, with Motta often just alternating between right and left hooks. Sadykhov was blocking some of the headshots with his arms. It's the body shots beneath his defenses that were killing him. Motta could only maintain this outpouring of unadulterated violence for so long though, and eventually punched himself out desperately trying to finish. One of the aspects that impressed me most about Sadykhov was just how well he maintained his composure throughout this early adversity. He never panicked or gambled. One could argue that staying in the pocket blocking gave Motta the chance to finish him, but he was defending himself properly, and Motta was wearing himself out punching arms. It says a lot about Nazim's defense that he was never cut in this fight. Of course, Motta was getting through a lot cleaner to the body, albeit far less often. The numerous punishing shots to the midsection that both were able to work into their combos was one of the most impressive aspects of the fight. You rarely see one fighter down the card with a really good grasp of body punching, much less two. Sadykhov came back fast with his own flurry of activity, landing a high kick and pressuring Motta from one side of the cage to the other. Now it was Sadykhov working Motta over against the cage, although not nearly as aggressively, as he was both still hurt himself and was doing a better job of being disciplined and staying within himself. Nazim having so many more paths to victory was certainly a big factor. Motta was a 5-1 underdog for a reason. He wasn't going to outskill or outdiversify this opponent, so his best chance was for the fight to be a brawl that ended with a knockout sooner rather than later. Both through countless lengthy and evolved punch combinations, though I'm somewhat dubious of Motta's technique as he relied far too much on wide hooks. The first round had tons of fireworks and back and forth action. I think Nazim could have won a decision with his grappling, but due to the fans strongly urging Nazim to go for it, this was mostly all action outside of Nazim opting to catch a breath with a little clinching to end the first. Motta outlanded Sadykhov 43-33 in round 1, and I think you have to give it to him because he was closer to finishing, even though the second half of the round was mostly Sadykhov. Sadykhov was clearly the better technical fighter, but Motta and the roar of the crowd ultimately dragged him into a high-octane brawl. Sadykhov came on in the second when he started seeing the varying strikes that he could set up. He has a far more diverse toolbox of techniques and attacks, and he was able to keep Motta guessing and off balance by not relying upon the same patterns. He utilized his knees and elbows very well, and wasn't afraid to throw a low percentage spinning kick now and then to keep Motta off balance. Nazim has a good left elbow that he cut Motta with early in the round. Sadykhov fought with more technique and patience in the second. He'd seen what Motta had to offer, and probably realized that Motta was also tiring quicker from the high pace and constant activity. Motta was still very dangerous though. He threw enough low and high kicks to threaten Sadykhov and make him respect something beyond his boxing, but he didn't have nearly as many looks and variations to open up his combos. With a minute left in the second, Sadykhov broke his clinch against the cage with a good combination of punches to the body, then the head. Motta fired back with a right hook, but Sadykhov caught him with a great right hook of his own. Sadykhov kept throwing heavy hooks and caught Motta square on the chin with a right. This ended the fight rather abruptly, but just as Bosacki did a great job allowing the fight to continue in round 1, he was spot on here and went to stop it. Motta crumbling to his butt and Sadykhov landing 2 quick punches with a third on the way was enough to know that Motta was out of it. Unfortunately for the fans, these sort of wars aren't very common anymore. It's hard to criticize guys for fighting smarter and not wanting to undertake any more injury risk than they already have to. You only have so many of these fights in you, but these are the fights that people actually watch MMA for. And if you fall within the 95% of fighters that have no real hope of ever winning a UFC title, a few of these can at least make you some actual bonus money to make up for the embarrassingly stingy 12-12 payouts that too many UFC fighters are still making, and keep you in the UFC for longer than the usual 2 or 3 fights. I expect this won't wind up being the UFC Fight of the Year, but it's definitely better than the other candidates such as Yuri Prochazka versus Jamal Hill and Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. Excellent match.